So for
Yeah.
for you guys, just to give you an intro of Abdullah, Abdullah's been my friend for a long time, and he's currently in the UK working as a data scientist in London. Got the job last year, and he went through the exact same interview process, as far as I remember, that Manan, you are currently going through. And most data engineers, most data scientists would go through the same exact stages that Abdullah has gone through. So it would be really helpful this time for us to hear exactly what he did, what worked for him, what his story is, and then ask him questions on what works and what doesn't work. So I've set out sort of an agenda for today, which we'll follow. So mainly we'll be talking about in the first 5 minutes what the typical interview stages are for a role that you guys would apply to. Data engineering, data science, and it also applies to most tech roles as well. And then we'll go on to the first stage of the interview, which is the screening stage. Manan has already been through that, but I'd love to hear from both of you guys exactly how you did, what worked, because most people will also want tips on that. So this will just be like 10 minutes, and then the rest of the time we'll use for the technical interview stage, which is the longest, the hardest, the most painful. So we'll go into that into a bit more detail. And in that stage, we'll discuss many things like how to prepare for the call, what to expect, how to manage multiple interviewees, because Abdullah, as I remember, you also had like 2 or 3 people sitting there in your interview, and how to answer, how to tackle difficult questions. So yeah, that's the agenda. And as for the stages, the typical stages of the interview, I'll just give sort of an overview of that, and you guys can tell me if I'm going on the right track here. Manan's currently applying to Revelio Labs. This is also a company. Manan, where was this based again? US?
Yeah, it's a New York-based data company, basically.
New York-based data company. So they have this really nice thing up on their website where they exactly show what hiring process will any candidate go through. And I feel like this hiring process is pretty typical for most tech roles and most data science, data engineering roles as well. So their hiring process involves an initial screening call. And if you pass that, you get an assignment. Then you get to the technical interview or technical review. And then finally, there's a final interview, most likely with the leadership team, most likely could be the CDO, etc., where they talk more about culture fit, etc., and then you get the offer at the end. So that is the typical process. And generally, those are the steps that will always be there in most tech-related roles. You guys think that's accurate?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, in my opinion as well, it's either you do have like a take-home assignment or you don't. But it's usually the initial screening call and then the technical rounds of technical interviews, either 1 or 2 or 3. Really depends.
And then the final interview with someone from the leadership team. That's always there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. Understood. So now I can stop sharing that and we can go into your story, man. Abdullah Tahir, it's on to you. So the first call, the screening call, I'd say just start off with your story and go on with how you landed that first interview and then what exactly happened there, what worked, what did they ask you, etc. And then we can go on to the next steps.
I think it might be more relevant. I would like to understand what from Manan and like Abdullah, what experience you guys have and what level of role you guys are looking for, so that might be more relevant. I don't know the information I give you guys, so I can go to detail accordingly.
Let's use Manan's as the case study right now because he literally has the interview on Friday right now.
Okay. So, what have you studied, man?
I've done my bachelor's in computer science, and then I do have like around 3 years of experience as a position. I was kind of sort of a mix of software and data engineering. So yeah, that's kind of
And
like
the
it.
role you're applying for?
The role I'm applying currently for is a data engineer, and it's a
Senior
specific,
data engineer.
senior data engineer. But I feel like it varies across the industry. Because they require 5 to 8 years of experience to keep you as a senior developer. And startups like Revelio, I feel like they're lenient, sort of. And yeah, that's kind of like it. So even with my 3 years of experience, they've allowed
Also,
me to,
depends on what they're asking for it. Are they when you say data engineering, are they asking for machine learning? Are they asking for what kind of specific?
They are not. So I'll open up the job post right in front of me. I specifically, so they had 3 open roles. One was for data sourcing, another one was for data flow, and then the third one was for infrastructure. So I applied for data sourcing, but then right after the initial screening call, they were like, we need people for data flow right now. So we're probably going to consider you for that. So that's like, Brock is sharing his screen right now. That's kind of like the summary of it.
Okay. Python bonus, SQL bonus. That's surprising. SQL bonus, what? Wait, do you know Go?
I do know Go. I have slight
Okay.
experience with Go, and I was really open about it. They're like, again, depending on the company, if you're applying to like
Yeah.
companies like Aldi or something, they would probably prefer that specific experience of the language. But my initial call was not with an HR; it was with the lead engineer at the team, and
Mhm.
he was like, "It's pretty transferable as long as you know the basics. We don't mind hiring you, even though you have your major experience is in Python."
Right? You would expect that if they're asking 3+ years in a software engineering role, that would generally be a person would need to know Python, and then and then they would be able to do something like Go, I think, which is
I mean, necessarily, unless it's like a very specifically data engineering heavy role,
yeah,
it's rarely the case that you go for Go first.
yeah,
But
right.
yeah,
Interesting. This is slightly different from the thing. Obviously, it's 'cause so yeah, I can yeah, it makes sense for me to tell you my story, but like it's different. I would say the route I went through. So, so I did a master's in artificial intelligence last year here in Birmingham, and um, and so after that master, so I did well, got a distinction, whatever. But like that was before I graduated. I got the job. In terms of the job hiring process, one of the factors I feel like was a big one over here. But my job wasn't remote specifically, so I don't know. I'm trying to wonder how big of an impact that is for you, depending on the company. But so I do stand up comedy as well, and that's like up on my LinkedIn, and it's something that's up on my LinkedIn for a reason because I've noticed that it helps. And I had I had also won a scholarship based on like a business idea and stuff. That's how I ended up with my master's. So I had noticed. So when I actually was making my CV and stuff, people at my careers departments in the university were like, "Don't put all these things." They don't want. It might be like, "Oh, this person has too many things going on and this and that." I have
Yeah.
noticed. So that might have been the reason I wasn't getting a lot of callbacks. I was getting some callbacks even after all this. My LinkedIn is, I feel like, pretty good. I had 1 or 2 videos up on there as well. But then this company, I feel like specifically has hired me because of those things, because I guess that's what they liked. It's very obvious to me that they wanted those skills. More than the skills, they wanted basically a culture fit. Like a lot of these companies care about that a lot, and those things helped a lot. In addition to the data science thing, is
Yeah.
being like, oh, because there's gonna be for you as well like a final culture fit interview. A lot of people, I personally, for me, I feel like a lot of people can do tech as well as I can, and they will get to that point. But at the end, it's always a person making the call, and I've noticed that specifically now. So in my after getting the job, after being here, I've noticed this, that everyone around me is either a graduate from Oxford, Cambridge, or Imperial College University, because they have not really gone for, if they want to hire a tech person, they hire them in India, but they've not really gone. They've like, oh, we take a person that we feel like can fit in and can learn and has like a lot of things going on and stuff, and then he'll figure it out. We'll train him. And one thing, the product, like I had an extra culture fit interview after the culture fit interview. The product CPO wanted to have, and he was like, "You have the business thing, you have the comedy thing. How do we know you will stay?" And I was like, "You're gonna have to take a chance on me." I was like, "This is what I want to do right now, and if I wanted to do those things, I would do those things." Obviously, he didn't know I needed the visa as well, but that was that I feel like was a big factor because at my company I do not see anyone else. No one else is there from like Pakistan or even India, like in the UK team. And even though it's a tech role, even though it's not necessarily required, I feel like, I don't know. Again, your company seems a bit different to me. Your role seems slightly different to me. But I feel like the tech. You've done the tech assessment. You said
I have. I've done the take-home assignment. It was pretty extensive.
what was it?
It was about one of their specific use cases. So these guys, they work in labor market analytics, and they basically provide multiple other companies among Fortune 500s with labor market analytics.
Okay.
So yeah, it was very highly specific to their use
Did
case.
you have to like analyze the data and do something with it, or
I mean, yeah, I had to, like, the main goal of the assessment was to basically validate one of the data sets that they currently produce at the company.
okay?
So yeah, it was more of like, I would say, a very data engineer specific sort of job in
Mhm.
terms of that's how I know, like, my friends have been doing in data engineering positions, usually just setting up the pipelines, and then after they're done setting up the pipelines, they're usually the ones who work right before data scientists,
Mhm.
and just like help the data scientists and the business analytics team with sort of fixing up the data and just like validating the data in very basic form before like the department's business analytics or data scientists basically use the data. So the assignment specifically was about validating and then delivering it to the client, who would then use it for analytics.
Okay. So far, just to make sure, you have done the assignment, this assessment. You've given it to them.
Yeah,
they
I've given it to them,
assignment.
and I got a good review back. And now I've scheduled the technical review, which is a 3-hour long thing with basically it's an hour long, 3 sessions back to back with 3 different engineers. 1 hour is going to be for like the assignment review. The second hour is for problem solving, coding, SQL, and then the third hour is going to be for like the system design side of things. So
Okay.
basically like pipeline design and data infrastructure and all that.
Okay. So hour 1, you're gonna go through your assignment, right? You're gonna explain it to them. You're gonna explain what you did, why you did.
Yep.
I had something similar in the sense they gave me a data set. So what they did was they added a column in the data set, and it was like a machine. They wanted to see the approach of how I deal with it and how I analyze it, which factors were important. They had given, I found the data set online as well. So I knew they had added a column. I fucked around with it a lot, but there were some things. What I did was I did the analysis. That was one of the good things I learned in the course. But then I also double checked with my professor. So there were some, I feel like, very niche things. So there's small things like when you split the data, for example, if things are like, if for example we have data for patients, and it's like obviously you have patient one, and if you train and test, right, train test with the data, and some of the patients go here, and there's like data leakage is possible. So there's other ways to do it, right? So there's like some nuances that I didn't need to do in my project, but then I wrote them down and I was like, oh, I also thought about this, but I didn't do it for this reason. And then even when there were some things that didn't really make sense, I was like, oh, I also tried this, but I was like, this wasn't working for me exactly. I'm not exactly sure why, but I kept it on this level. Like the random forest regressor wasn't performing as well. And then McCall was sitting there and he was like, oh, maybe it wasn't performing for this reason. I was like, haha, I have thought about that reason. That was not the reason. I don't know what the reason was, but I tried that approach. So like, if they definitely would want you to know that you tried 5 different approaches, why you chose this approach. What really helps, I think, is just like a habit of mine at this point, literature. You can put some literature in there. You can be like, I looked at literature, and this is one of the reasons that I was an additional reason. Basically, you could do the basic thing and just add. You don't necessarily need to do. I mean, obviously, it would be great if you added some, obviously, did something better. But even if you don't do it, you can still. There are some approaches that wouldn't be very useful, but they exist. And they just, if they see that, oh, you tried all of these things, because they give you like 2 hours or something. They're like, oh, this assignment should take 2 hours, an hour a day. But if you spend 3 days on it, it shows. And that only shows if you're like, oh, and I read about this, and I read about this. For like 2-3 things I think help a lot, because they're like, oh, he thought about those angles, which I feel like is more important because they can do the job they've given you regardless. And they know. And it would really be helpful if you kind of could figure out what exactly they do. Because the job is generally, the company generally does one thing, right? At the end of the day, they want you to do that exact same thing. So for my company, feature importance was a big thing. I didn't actually realize it at that time. If I knew, I would have, like, they attribute to marketing channels like, oh, this channel was important, this channel was important, using feature importance. There are many techniques to do that. I got away with it, but like I found out another person did an interview, they went with like some other techniques specifically to find feature importance, which was, again, like if you could look into different techniques to do the same thing, I think big difference. And just, then you have a lot to talk about in the final review, because they just want to hear. If you give them less space, I mean, not to babble, but like if you have enough things to, you're like, oh, I did this and I did this and it went this way and then I failed, but then I tried this and I failed too. So I ended up with this basic approach. That's probably why people do it like this, but it was quite fun. And then because it's an hour, if the more time you give them, the more they're gonna wanna fuck with you. So that's personally the data set that helped a lot. Because I had half an hour. I was just like, when I finished, I remember they had no further questions, and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, that's super powerful. So a quick summary, like for the assignment review, the most important thing you're focusing on is to actually show them that you did the work, you did your homework, you spent a lot more time on it than was expected, and you can show that you have proactively thought about multiple solutions rather than just the thing that they told you to do, and you were like, okay, I tried this worked, this didn't work. That was basically it. And then cool tidbit there is to actually use literature. I always 100% believe the giving them less space to ask you questions that might fuck with you, because the strategy I use for like earlier interview stages, like the screening one, is to ask them questions before they ask you questions, just to move the conversation in the direction that you want, really. But yeah, super powerful. Okay, next hour is supposed to be about coding in SQL.
You don't have anything competency based. This is completely technical. This bit, right?
I would assume so. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't say it anywhere.
Anything? It says that first hour is going to be this, second hour is going to be this, third.
I mean, like straight up says that, but
Okay.
you never know, really.
The whole opposite happened to me because I had done this initial questions and then I went to the thing, and then after the half an hour, both of them were data scientists. They had asked one competency-based question and they realized, oh, this motherfucker is going to keep answering. So they went back to fucking technical questions again. I was not prepared. But yeah, sorry. Okay, so second hour is what? Second hour
To
is-
literally read out specifically what they've said.
yeah.
They've said the second hour will focus on coding / algorithms or SQL. That's
Ugh.
literally what they said. Yeah.
Ugh. Okay.
Yeah.
So there will probably be a live task. That means is that okay?
I
what we're
would
expecting.
think it's an hour. In my past experiences, I've been giving a lot of interviews in the past days.
Hmm.
So in my past experiences, this is probably going to be a set of problems, not just a single problem.
Like the lead code ones?
Yeah, probably one of those. And I'm pretty confident about those. I feel
Okay.
like just like grinding them as well.
No.
So that's probably not an issue, but we should still talk about it. I mean,
I've again, this wasn't part of my process this time, but from the research we've used to do, obviously they want to know. You've done these interviews, so you would know that, I guess. But like, they again care about what your thought process is. They want you to,
yeah.
yeah. I think you would know this part. It's quite standard for software engineers. Like, you gotta speak out your thought process. I've personally always run away from this part of the interview. I don't love it because I don't understand why companies want you to do it. So I quite, yeah. I think
Yeah, in my opinion as well. I feel like the hardest part of the job is probably the technical interview. And then after that, the job itself is like pretty much basic level stuff most of the times.
yeah, but this part is also quite pointless, right? You don't have to, yeah. Well, it's data. I don't know. Maybe in data engineering, you need people to watch you do things. But yeah, I would recommend. If again, I think people are still people, man. Like, it just gotta, especially white people. It makes a big. If they just think that you're having fun, you want to be here, and you're like, oh, if you, I actually do want to be here. So maybe I'm not like saying act it. I'm just like, you're doing it for a reason, right? I hope like you're like, oh, I want to work for this company, and this is like you like this a little bit, so you're like, okay. I feel like enthusiasm goes a long way because they're tired of fucking interviews and same shit. And if even when you're doing it, even if you're doing it wrong, if you're just like, I've seen this, I worked this when I did my final year. Tell me, what's a cool project you've worked on?
Dude, a bunch of them. But like, since you're talking about the final year project, my final year project was basically a mix of NLP and computer vision modules, and I basically generated cricket commentary from just like video. So it had like stuff like just like figuring out what type of shot the players are playing. Was it a boundary? How many runs? Was it an out? Who's bowling? And then based on all those things, it would generate like commentary ball by ball.
Okay, sound more excited.
Yeah, Manan was using GPT before we knew it. Before at least I knew what GPT was.
I'm just selling it. That's what I'm saying. Again, this is a personal thing. This is my personality, so I don't want to impose that on you. But I feel like because we do this as well, computer engineers do this. We have this issue where we're like, yeah, I did. Fucking be like, oh, that was so. Similarly, what I worked on was like football, FIFA, which is quite cool because it was like Google and Manchester City. They had a competition where you had to teach players how to play football using reinforcement learning. I sucked at it, but it was so much fun. And I learned so much. And it's also helped me through like things because I'm like, I did that. And I'm like, I tell them, I'm like, that's the coolest thing I've worked on. And then for my master's, I worked with brain signals to identify hand gestures. Again, it's nothing groundbreaking, nothing amazing, but I was fucking happy about doing it. So it's like, that translates. People, especially right now in the field we're in, people appreciate that, I think, a little bit. They're like, oh, okay, he's like, he's like, okay, he wants to talk about this. Rather than being like, fucking just eat the ear off. Sorry, that's again, I'm imposing a lot of my personality on you. Like, this is you've got your own way of dealing with it. I'm just saying, if it's actually New York, I don't know. Maybe it's just like Indian sitting in New York. I don't know who is actually doing it. Like other,
it was pretty chill people. Yeah.
Yeah, but if it's like New York people, they they're gonna want to have to talk to you. They're gonna have to like they want like someone who's like, yo, like I wanted to do this, and it's not just because my wife works in Archilek or something like that. It's like gotta and yeah, honestly, it's interview's gonna be remote, job's gonna be remote, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
all different again from yeah. And the third hour is
Just
infrastructure.
before you just
Sorry.
before you go there, I 100%. It's so nice to be validated by a data scientist because usually, I was expecting you might come in and say, "Hey, the actual technical knowledge is actually really important." You can
Yes,
blab on, but
he
it is
has
important. Yeah, he has that. He has that, right? And that's the key part that's usually missing from data engineers, from tech people in general who are going into these interviews is underselling themselves. And I've been talking to this about Manan. He knows that I'm literally repeating myself because I said this exact same thing. But yeah, super, super, super cool there. Okay, cool. Last part really is just is system design. One will focus on system design.
that is beyond me. I don't
Yeah,
know what that word
that's also a very vague
That's
description of what will happen. So,
it's
Manan, do
probably
you have
not.
any insights?
Yeah,
Mhm.
on this, I feel like just on the last thing that we were talking about, like the enthusiasm and all that, I feel like you have to just like pan the room out first, or in this case, pan the virtual room out first on who you're talking to. Some people are like pretty straight up when it comes to specifically like engineering, and I feel like in when it's that, it's better to like be straight up, act like a geek, zero face expressions, just like mention like keywords that they're necessarily looking for. But like just about this interview that I was talking about, the guy was like, he graduated like 2 years before me, so I'm thinking he's probably 26, 27. Uh, the lead engineer that I'm talking about, and we like literally had like a bonding session over the fact that we both have been working from the start of our careers on like startups. I've been like most of my experience has been with startups, so like it was less of a screening call and more of just like a hangout basically with a new person. So yeah, I totally second you on that thing. It's like the enthusiasm part, but like with the exception of because I had recently I had a screening interview at Aldi in Germany, and that was a relocation thing. And she was pretty straight up about it before I even said like, "Hi, it's great to be on the call. Thank you for being on the call with me." She was like, "Hi, Manan. I'm gonna start with this 2 minute intro on my end. I'm gonna do my intro. I want you to do your intro. I want you to specifically mention this, this, and this, and then we're gonna move on with the questions." So again, I feel like it's
Yeah, no, I'm with you. But my thing with this is, yeah, I'm not saying fake enthusiasm. In terms of, I would again, I know this is a bit, it comes off very first worldly, but if at the end of the day, when you get the job, you kind of have to do the job, and you wanna like it's just like dating as well. It's like you wanna go for the company that gets it, because if you end up in a company that is like that, you're gonna suffer. Again, I told you the tech thing, I hated it. I've always tried to find a way around it, and this is something that worked. And the fact now I noticed that they hired me because of me, it's amazing. Everyone they've hired is similar to me. Like in the sense they're all just like personality hires more than actually good at their job. But that works because like so I think so cliche, but be excited by the things you're excited by, and just like just be comfortable. And if they don't like it, fuck them. You got this one. You've done other interviews. You're gonna get more interviews, but they will appreciate that. I think you'll be more comfortable in the interview where you're like, this is how I am. A bit
yeah,
weird.
totally makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Uh,
All right. So on the system design part of things, I feel like it's a very data engineer specific thing or a software engineer specific thing. Uh, it's probably gonna be how you build scalable systems. And I mean, recently there's so many things just coming into play. You've got new architectures coming in. You've got new services coming in. You've got new cloud providers coming in with new sort of features in their services. So it's like keeping up to date
what's the
on that end. Sorry.
Sorry? What's the name of the company?
It's called Revelio Labs. It's Revelio Labs.
Revelio Labs. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're saying the structure, but couldn't you look into something relevant to what they do?
I have. So yeah, that's where I'm going. Depends on the specific interview. For this interview, I have been prepping up mostly what they've told me about, which was necessarily just PySpark. Again, that's not part of how you build the infrastructure. It's what you use in the infrastructure, and then the infrastructure itself. they've mostly, like, in the interview call, in the initial screening call, the guy was like, we've just broke even, and now the issue is we've been using cloud providers, and we're getting a shitload of bills, and we want to move to sort of an offline but on cloud infrastructure where we monitor, where we deploy, where we, all those sort of, basically the continuous integration, continuous develop pipeline. We do that on our own servers instead of using services. So that was like their main thing. And that's what I'm focusing on, really. So it's a whole lot of Docker. It's a whole lot of Databricks offline. It's just like Go, if you want to look at routines, Go routines,
Have
stuff
you
like
looked
that.
into who their top competitors are?
I did not. This is a really, I mean, I did Google it later, and there's like companies that are doing this, but there are not many people who are doing, like, who are working with labor market analytics, except for like very specific people who target companies specifically in the US. And they're only monitoring like the US data on it. But these guys are like working with global data, and they're trying to, basically.
Might actually be useful. Again, it might be a bit late for that now, but like might actually be useful even in an interview hour one to ask them that, to find out, because like I looked at these companies, but who are your direct competitors? Is there anyone else doing this? So they would know who's doing it, and that might be quite interesting for them. That always shows. But also, if you get a chance between the interviews, you could kind of look into the other companies a little bit. You probably already have found them, or you can ask them as well. And then I think that would be quite useful. Just be like, it's like they would already know probably the solution you're going to come up with for them. It might be hard for you to come up with something new, but they'll still appreciate if you just were like, why don't you guys do this? Or did you guys try this like these guys did? And then either they'll be like, because someone will have thought of that. And I think that's the only thing I can give you from that one, honestly. When I did, so the company, I did marketing for a little bit, even when I did that job interview. And then when I did this one, I always try to go with something a little bit like, oh, I didn't see like presence on, like, why do you guys market like this? Or is there a reason you guys do this? I've seen companies try this, blah, 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 a little bit. So in terms of infrastructure, that could be useful. You know better. I have very little knowledge about.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest on that, but that was like the first thing that he touch base on me with. He was like, this is specifically what we're looking for. We've done all like the analytics or all like the infrastructure side of things. Now our focus is we want engineers who can bring it from cloud services back to our own servers. We want you to be prepped up for that. So, I mean, again, system design wise, I'm not sure whether I can ask them this, but I do have this plan for my assignment review, because I did look into it was a very specific topic. It was anomaly detection in time series data.
Okay.
And there's only, like, from what I found on Google Scholar and from Medium and all that, there's like literally 2 algorithms out there that do it. Literally 2 algorithms. And one is outdated. I did not go with like the only one that was left. I went with a very basic statistic approach of anomaly detection instead of going for the STL, because that was like a 3-line code, and it basically, I was not sure about like the math behind it. What did you
use?
I basically just use like moving averages and regression, just to try to figure out, all right, for the past 3 years we've been getting this data, this all right. So talking about the specific use case, they were basically dealing with all sorts of, so the basic data set that they provided me with, it was the inflows, the outflows, and the headcount of the companies. And every month they would update it. Every month they would basically just scraping from the web. They would provide the analytics. All right, for this year or for this month, we have 265 engineers who are at Oracle. And the next month it's changed like that. So there were things that were like season based, I would say. So like at the mid of the year, you would see a lot of inflow because there's people graduating, and then there's at the end of the fiscal year, you get the new budget for the company, you get more hiring budget. That's where you're hiring engineers. Around January, you would see like the trend going up for inflows, the trend coming down for outflows. So stuff like that, basically. So what I really did was I took a window of 3 years, which would necessarily take care of any one-off events like COVID. It was like a thing where the whole market went south. There were not a lot of hirings except for like hirings in pharma and then hirings in tech because everything was going remote. So just to deal with those things, I just went with a very basic approach. I would take a moving average on these things, have a range of 3 standard deviations. If I do get any data point that's out of these ranges, I feel like that should be pointed out as an anomaly, and then we can later use human intervention as like a way to validate. And I feel like that's a sort of foolproof method to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was the one I was talking about. So
Yeah.
I did see that.
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
yeah. Continue.
Yeah. So I think
Right.
SDL is based on this.
It's based on SQL, probably.
Yeah, the graph test. Yeah.
Standardized, yeah, deviate. Yeah, that's a good approach. Yeah. It was just
Yeah. So
well.
I'll go through this as well. In fact, this is really useful. I'll have something to talk about, like just like
Yeah.
it literally says 3.3 seasonality and SDL.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the one.
Yeah. We were using
But-
this in modeling as well.
Amazing.
I think it's a good way. Yes, I think you personally. Again, I would then at the end of all this, I would really stress. When I did my fucking interview, I was like, "Fuck it, I killed it. I don't give a shit. I've never killed a tech interview ever in my life." And I was like, "I did my job. Whatever happens, happens." And then I got this. I was like, "Shit, I got a job." Like, I would just like. Here's the thing: so many things that go. Like, I know the process you're going through. I've been an international, and I have been in Turkey, and I have done this a million times. Even here with the fucking visas changing, it's just like one of those things where you can do your best. There's so many factors. There's just so many factors. Sometimes just people forget something. People suck, man. People who work at companies sometimes just suck. So I feel like you really have, like, if you have technical knowledge and you do your homework with anything in life, like, that's the best you can do. Like, you show up, you have fun, fucking take your interview. And like, if we idiots have gotten jobs, like, there's a reason, like, dude, I work with people. I'm telling you, fucking, you know this probably. The people that get jobs, like the people that are working in the first world country and they're earning money. I swear to God.
It's wild, bro.
It's like, I wouldn't take it on caliber. That's all I'm saying. I wouldn't take it like, oh, I did this and I did this and then still. I think you're covering most angles. I think you're covering as many angles you can for a 3-hour interview. I wouldn't over prepare and then kind of stress out. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm not stressing out at all.
I'd take
It's
a day
just
off
that-
for it, and I would be like, "Fuck it, fuck some shit up." You remember SATs? Did you give SATs?
I did it.
Remember how it was a thing? You had to take a day off with SATs.
Yeah, right before the exam, just
Fuck
fucking do
this.
nothing.
You gotta go and draw.
Yeah, or that.
It does help, because in engineering, I swear to God, the biggest thing is everyone's dull. Like, everyone, it's less now. There are more people getting into this field, but someone who's doing data engineering, 90% of the people next to you, if they're remote, they're gonna be like dull and boring. And you kind of want to, if it's New York, I think you're fine. Like, you want to just be happy. I think that's the best thing you could add.
I mean, my guy, I was looking at this. So the 3 interviewers that I'm going in with. One guy is has done his Masters of Computer Science from Georgia Tech. The other guy is Masters of Data Science from fucking Columbia.
Means nothing.
And I'm not so just like seconding your point. These are like the sort of people who probably you can say they know their shit, but that's all they do.
I will interrupt you right now.
Okay, sure.
Full scholarship, Masters in Artificial Intelligence with distinction. And I swear to God, dude, I swear to God, I can tell you right now, you have more technical knowledge than I do. Probably you've worked longer than I have. I cannot stress this enough. No, I'm sitting with Imperial. I'm looking at them every day. I'm observing them. We get an email sometimes. Imperial QS rankings. Imperial is the second highest ranked university in the world. They're all fucking Imperial, and I'm like, fucking hell. I did fucking AGU Kayseri.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, they were better. Like, I know people. Because the thing is, there's a big factor that these guys, they did other things. Just like I'm now doing other things alongside my technical thing. You're sitting there, you're doing your technical thing. You're not out there clubbing. You're not out there fucking. You're not out there doing a lot of things. You spend a lot more time on these things than they do. I told you, I got a distinction. Like, that's, and I did not put in half as much effort as I had to for computer engineering in Turkey, or I would have in Pakistan or FAST or whatever. Because fucking they just don't let you get through until you just die. Whereas here, if you just like spend enough time, you ask for help, you go to them, they'll help you all. If you're you do the basic work, you're fine. And I'm telling you, this is like these universities. So I wouldn't take them. In fact, that's what I'm saying. If you put them on a pedestal, you're gonna struggle because you're gonna be nervous around them. You're gonna just treat them. And they also are used to this. I'm used to this. I've noticed this gap. We get people from India now. We get some people from. We're not used to this. We're used to a gap with the people. We're like, oh, that's a senior person. Like even if they're like 2 years senior, if they're like, we don't give them that. Treat them. Talk to them like you're talking to me. Talk to them exactly like that. Like you're on their level. Because you are on their level.
That makes sense. I mean, I've worked with like PhDs from UCLA, man, and it's like
worse probably.
Whatever. And they're like, again, I know my knowledge is probably way better than them. So like, all right. So the reason I said this was that's how my mind works. So I'll just tell you like how I think about this. So most of the times these people have very specific, I would say, just like a streamline of knowledge. So if you go and talk about on this line of knowledge with them, they're probably going to stay talking for like hours. But if you do deviate a little, they don't know.
This is being recorded. Yeah. I can clip you out and put you up on one of those. I'll see you on one of those sites. Anyway, I'm sorry. Continue.
But yeah. So what has worked for me in the past is I've come prepared with like instead of going deep in the topic, what I've done is I've went across topics and have just the right amount of knowledge in a specific topic where I think I would have more knowledge than the other person. But what that does for me is, again, I steer the conversation there, and then when I know from their expressions or their reactions that I'm at a point where they don't have any further knowledge of this topic, that's where I can, drive the conversation. So again, just like mentioning these names, that usually kind of gives me the motivation to go about just like going through these things, just like doing the extra effort or the extra mile on the research end of things, just like you talk, like just put in like sort of literature in there. So yeah, I'm just like on that kind of helps me a lot.
Yeah, all I'm saying is, I know you will go the extra mile because we do, and that's there's so much more than I realize than they do, or they've ever had to do. They have no concept of having worked this hard and having to go through this many interviews. They're not used to doing more than 5-10 interviews like for a job. Like most of the people who go to private schools here get jobs through networking. So just like give yourself a pat on the back for that, because like because we're sitting there, we get less odds, but you're just as good as they are. That's a big thing. That's why I came here to fucking prove that to them. Like
dude, I believe you're way better than them. I've like for the past 2-3 years I've worked with these guys. Like
exactly.
That's all my experiments. So,
they're the ones judging you, right? So like if they can be wrong, if like you can do your best and like you gotta impress yourself, right? Like it's so cliche. I'm so sorry. But it is unfortunately.
Conversation turned into.
I sound like Raj. I'm sorry. If you had something, because
that's what I was about to come to. Siddhar Abdullah, how are you? Do you have any questions, man?
नहीं मैं बस observe कर रहा हूँ.
Do you have any input, any questions for Abdullah here before he leaves?
No. I think for Manan, वो recursive function देख लेना SQL में. शायद वो पूछे और window functions.
Recursive functions. Good idea, man. I have not covered these.
Because मुझसे अभी जो मेरा लीड थे इधर KPMG का, उसने मुझसे पूछा था जब वो KPMG पाकिस्तान का इंटरव्यू कर रहा था. वो असल में मुझसे पूछ रहा था कि मैं क्या इंटरव्यू में पूछूं. तो मैंने कहा मुझे नहीं पता, जो SQL में पूछते हो वही पाइथन में पूछ लेना. तो उसने सबसे पहले मुझसे रिकर्सिव फंक्शन पूछ लिया. तो मैं उसके मुंह की तरफ देख रहा था SQL में कैसे करूं.
I had no idea we had recursive function in SQL, but cool.
I also had no idea जब तक उसने पूछा नहीं.
He just stayed silent for the whole call and then dropped value bombs. So, ये पढ़ के जाइए बस.
You're not having a technical interview, so I don't know how relevant this is for you because you're having like the coding thing. A thing that kind of worked in my favor was that, so they asked me questions. I was not prepared for Python related questions like what's a tuple, what's bias versus how do we add bias in a machine learning model. But for some reason I had some knowledge from over the years, and the fact that I was kind of getting to conclusions myself, I feel like played a big part. Like,
so what would you mean by that exactly?
For example, if they were like,
this link might be helpful for you. I just texted it.
If they were asking like, oh, how do you add like what's the trade-off of bias versus variance in a machine learning model? I don't still remember it off the top of my head, but I was like, okay, so when we add data from ourselves, Right, that's when we're adding when we're trying to fix the hyperparameters, or we're trying to add things according to, we're adding bias. But then there's like, I was getting 2 points like this. I was like, oh, this would make sense, because then we don't want it to overfit. And then yes, right? And I'm like, yeah. So because I was logically getting to all the answers, I feel like that made a big difference. I did not have anything memorized. It was just like over years. So I felt like, oh, I knew stuff, which apparently some of that I did as well. There was a question, very simple. He's like, what's a tuple? What's the difference between a tuple and a dictionary or something like that? And I was like, I was like, I never used a tuple in so long, I forgot. Manan, what's the difference between a tuple and a fucking dictionary, man?
I have no fucking clue. I think those tuples can have duplicates while dictionaries cannot. I'm not sure. But yeah, point being, like, two-sided sword in my opinion.
Yeah.
I recently had a technical interview at EPAM, and the guy was like sort of driving me in the direction where he was like, all right, so what are the advantages of SQL indexes? It's like they make the querying fast and stuff. All right, cool. What are the disadvantages? I was like, off the top of my head, I cannot think of anything, but like, give me a minute. And then I did think about it, did not come up with anything. And he was like, okay, so maybe they're perfect. Maybe they don't have any disadvantages. And that kind of like got me.
You can also make the query slow now.
Yeah. So, it kind of drove me in a direction, or he kind of misguided me. So again, man, I believe the sort of company that you're working at, it's similar to Rebelio, where they're kind of, looking for people who can learn, and looking for people who are not only like specifically working on just one task and can be like, they can work with through multiple teams, and they just like have a set of skills. But again, totally depends on the size of the company and the sort of work that they're kind of
culture that they have.
After this one, I had 1 or 2 interviews lined up for some reason. Oh, I got on an interview and I was like, oh, this is not gonna. He gave me a task and he was like, now how would you write this like this? And I was like, mate, sorry, I've got my job. I can't even be bothered anymore. And I was like, I've never. It was because it was like a researcher job. I think applied machine learning research or something like that. Yeah, so much variation. So these things are Raki might find you like I don't know, but like these things that I feel like vary a lot, place to place, people to people.
Yeah.
A lot of factors come in. You can do your best, and one of these days it works out. I hope for everyone.